Good morning, everybody. Welcome to week 2. Hope you had a good 4th. Today is class 4, and today we cross the most important line in this course, the line between measuring work and pricing work. Read the subtitle with me. Turning a base wage into a true, fully burdened cost per hour, the number that actually hits your estimate. That word actually is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because here's the thing I want you to internalize in the next 80 minutes. The wage you pay a worker and the cost of employing that worker are two very different numbers, and estimators who confuse them lose money on every job they win. And they will win those jobs. That's the cruel part. If you underprice labor, your bids look great. You'll win everything, and you'll bleed on all of it. I spent years pricing electrical work, labor-heavy work, where labor can run half or more of the job cost, and I can tell you, nobody ever went broke because they estimated the wrong price on a stick of EMT. Material has a quote behind it. Labor is where estimates live or die, and burden is the part of labor that beginners miss. By the end of today, you'll be able to build a fully burdened labor rate from scratch, blend it into a composite crew rate, and, in our hands-on segment, you'll build yourself a crew cost calculator in Excel that you will use for the rest of this course, including on your small commercial building project. So laptops out, Excel open, but hands off the keyboard until we get there. Quick map check. Week 1, we lived in quantities, reading the documents, doing takeoff, getting to accurate counts and measures in OSD and Excel. And I told you then, a quantity without a price is trivia. This week, we start attaching dollars, and we start with labor because labor is the riskiest dollar in the estimate. Think about the 3 big buckets of direct cost. Material. You get a quote. You add tax and waste. The supplier has largely fixed your risk. Equipment. Rental rates are published. Again, mostly known. Labor? Labor is a forecast. You're predicting how many hours human beings will take to do work months from now, and whether you can't see, on a site you haven't mobilized, with a crew you haven't hired, and then multiplying those hours by a rate. 2 chances to be wrong, the hours and the rate. This week handles both. Today, the rate, getting from a wage to a true hourly cost, and combining workers into crews. Then productivity, the hours side, which we open today on slide 10 and keep building on. Together, rate times hours is your labor line, and on the kinds of projects you'll estimate in this course, the labor line is the whole ballgame. One more framing note before we dive in. Everything today plugs directly into the workflow we've established, quantities from OSD land in Excel, and now Excel is where we'll build rates. RS means enters the picture on the crew slide, because means prices everything with crews, and you can't use means intelligently until you understand what's inside a crew rate. That's today. All right, here's the concept the whole day hangs on. A carpenter agrees to work for you at, let's say, $28 an hour. That's the base wage. It's what shows up on the paycheck. It's what the worker thinks of as what I make. Now here's the question that separates estimators from everybody else. What does that hour of carpentry cost your company? It is nowhere close to 28. Think of the slide's image, an iceberg. The base wage is the part above the waterline, the part everybody sees. Below the waterline is everything else your company pays because that worker is on the payroll. The government's cut in payroll taxes, unemployment insurance, workers' comp premiums, health insurance, retirement match, paid time off, training, the small tools, and the phone, and maybe the truck. All of it scales with that worker's hours, and none of it appears on the paycheck. That whole underwater mass is called labor burden, and the sum, base wage plus burden, is the fully burdened labor rate. That is the only labor number allowed in your estimate. Ever. Let me make it concrete with round numbers, and we'll build the real math on slides 4 through 7. That $28 carpenter typically costs somewhere in the neighborhood of the high 30s to low 40s per hour, depending on the trade, the state, and the company's benefits and safety record. Burden commonly runs from the 30s up past 50% on top of the wage, and higher on high-risk trades or rich union packages. Now feel the danger. An estimator who prices labor at the base wage has silently underpriced every labor hour by a third or more. On a bid with 10,000 labor hours, That's a six-figure hole, dug before the job even starts, invisible until the cost reports come in. And here's the kicker. Burden isn't optional, and it isn't negotiable. FICA doesn't care about your bid strategy. These costs will be paid. The only question is whether you put them in the estimate or eat them. So, where does the underwater part of the iceberg come from, exactly? Two categories: cost the law makes you pay, and cost you choose to pay. Statutory and voluntary. Let's take them in order. Category 1. Statutory burdens, the ones with laws behind them. For line items, get your calculators out, because these have real numbers attached, and I expect you to know them. Number 1. FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act, Social Security and Medicare. Here's what most people don't realize until they run a payroll. The deduction the employee sees on their pay stub is only half the story. The employer pays a matching share out of its own pocket. The employer side is 6.2% of wages for Social Security, up to the annual wage base, plus 1.45% for Medicare, no cap. 6.2 plus 1.45, 7.65% of every payroll dollar paid by the company on top of the wage. That one never changes with your safety record or your state. It's the floor. Number 2, FUTA, Federal Unemployment Tax. The headline rate is 6%, but it only applies to the first $7,000 of each worker's annual wages, and employers who pay their state unemployment tax on time get a credit that knocks the effective rate down to 0.6% of that first $7,000. About $42 a year per employee. Tiny per hour once you spread it. But notice something estimator brained about it. Because it's capped on the first $7,000, its per hour impact is bigger for short tenure and high turnover workforces. You pay that $42 again for every new hire. Construction turns over people constantly. Caps like this are why burden isn't just one flat percent. Number 3, SUTA, State Unemployment. Every state runs its own fund with its own wage base and its own rate. And here's the important part. The rate is experience rated per employer. Lay off a lot of people, your rate climbs. Keep a stable workforce, it falls. In Texas, the wage base is modest. First $9,000, roughly, and rates run from well under 1% for a clean employer to several percent for a troubled one. So SUTA is the first burden item where your company's history changes your cost of labor. It won't be the last. Number 4, workers' compensation, insurance for on-the-job injuries. This is the biggest, most variable, most construction-specific statutory burden of them all, and it gets its own slide. But before we advance, let's tally the tolls so far. FICA 7.65, plus FUTA, a rounding error, plus SUTA, call it a point or two. You're at roughly 9 to 10% added to every wage before we've bought a single benefit or written a comp policy. That's the statutory floor, written into law, identical whether you're the best contractor in Texas or the worst. Quick check, somebody. If the base wage is $30, what does FICA alone add per hour? $2.30. Right. Now let's meet the heavyweight. Workers' comp deserves its own slide for one reason. It's the burden item where what you build and how safely you build it change the number dramatically. The mechanics. Comp premiums are quoted as a rate per $100 of payroll, and the rate depends on the classification code, essentially, the trade. Why? Because the insurance is pricing injury risk, and injury risk is wildly different across trades. An office clerk classifies at pennies per hundred. A trim carpenter, a few dollars per hundred. A structural steel worker, or a roofer, it can be north of $10, $15, $20 per $100 of payroll. Translate that, for high-risk ironwork or roofing, comp alone can add 10, 15, 20% to the cost of every labor hour. On those trades, comp can be the single biggest burden line, bigger than FICA, sometimes bigger than health insurance. Estimating consequence number 1. You cannot use one comp rate for a whole project. A blended estimate that averages the roofer with the flagman misprices both. Serious estimators carry burden by trade, which, conveniently, is exactly what the calculator you're building today will do. Now the second lever, the EMR, experience modification rate. The insurance industry compares your company's actual loss history against the average for your class codes. Average company, EMR of 1.0. Safer than average, below 1.0. A 0.80 EMR means you pay 80 cents on the dollar for comp. Worse than average, above 1.0. A 1.4 EMR pays a 40% surcharge on every comp dollar, on every job, for years. Sit with that for a second, because it's one of the most important business lessons hiding in this course. Safety is an estimating input. A contractor with a 0.75 EMR bidding against a contractor with a 1.3 EMR has a built-in labor cost advantage on every single labor hour, before either one sharpens a pencil. When people tell you safety pays, this is the line item where it literally, arithmetically pays. And one more practical note. Many owners and GCs pre-qualify subs by EMR and won't even let a mod above 1.0 bid. Your safety record decides which bid rooms you're allowed into. Category 2. The burdens you choose, fringe benefits, and the miscellaneous costs of keeping a worker productive. Voluntary is a slippery word here, though. In a tight labor market, try recruiting a good journeyman with no health plan and no PTO. You choose these the way you choose to put fuel in the truck. Walk the list with me. Health insurance. Usually the biggest voluntary line. The employer's share of a family plan is hundreds of dollars a month, spread over roughly 173 working hours a month. That's real dollars per hour, and notice something important. It's a flat cost per worker, not a percentage of wage. That means health insurance is a bigger percentage burden on lower-wage workers. A $500 a month employer share is about $2.90 an hour whether the worker makes $18 or $48. Burden percentages are steeper at the bottom of the wage scale. Remember that when you estimate apprentice-heavy crews. Retirement, 401k match or pension contribution. Commonly a few percent of wage were offered. On union work, the pension is defined in the agreement, hour by hour. Paid time off, and this one hides. Vacation, holidays, sick days. Here's the estimator's way to see it. You pay for 2,080 hours a year, but if the worker gets, say, 3 weeks of combined PTO and holidays, you only receive about 1,960 productive hours. The pay for the non-working hours has to be carried by the working hours. Every paid day off raises the effective cost of every worked hour. It's not a bill anybody mails you. It's arithmetic, and that's exactly why beginners miss it. Training and certifications. Safety training, OSHA cards, licensing, apprenticeship contributions. Hours in a classroom are hours you pay for and don't bill. Small tools and consumables. The grinders, cords, blades, bits, gloves. The stuff too small to be equipment, but too real to be free. Many contractors carry it as a percent of labor. A couple points is typical, precisely because it tracks labor hours. Phone, truck, fuel where the company provides them. Again, cost per month divided by hours per month equals dollars per hour. None of these is huge alone. Together, the voluntary stack routinely adds another 15 to 25% plus on top of the wage, on par with the entire statutory stack. And unlike the statutory side, this stack is company-specific, which is why real estimating departments maintain their own burden worksheets instead of grabbing a national average, which is exactly what we build next. Time to assemble the machine. Follow the slide, and follow me on the board, because in 15 minutes you're doing this yourselves in Excel. Our worker, a journeyman carpenter, base wage $28 per hour. Statutory stack, the percent of wage items first. FICA at 7.65%, 28 times 0.0765, $2.14. FUTA and SUTA together. On a stable Texas employer, call the blended effect about 1%, 28 cents. Remind them, capped items are being approximated per hour. The calculator can do it properly. Workers' comp, carpentry class. Let's use $7.50 per $100 of payroll with an EMR of 1.0, 7.5% of 28, $2.10. Voluntary stack. Health insurance. Employer pays $520 a month. Divide by about 173 hours, $3 an hour. Retirement match at 3%, 84 cents. PTO and holidays. 15 paid days off spread across the worked hours. Roughly a 6% uplift on wage, $1.68. Training, 25 cents. Small tools at 2%, 56 cents. Phone/miscellaneous, 15 cents. Add the burden column. 2.14 plus 0.28 plus 2.10 plus 3.00 plus 0.8, 4 plus 1.68 plus 0.25 plus 0.56 plus 0.15 equals $11 an hour of burden. Fully burden rate, $28 plus $11 equals $39 per hour. Burden percentage, 11 over 28, about 39%. Look at what just happened. Our carpenter makes 28. Our carpenter costs 39. Every hour of carpentry in your estimate priced at 28 instead of 39 is $11 walking out the door. And on a job with 5,000 carpentry hours, that's $55,000 of margin gone before mobilization from one wrong cell in a spreadsheet. 3 takeaways before we scale this up to cruise. 1. Burden is a build-up, not a guess. Every line came from somewhere checkable, a tax table, an insurance policy, a benefits invoice, the company handbook. When your chief estimator asks, where do you get 39%, you show the worksheet, line by line. 2. The percentage travels, the pieces don't. Same carpenter in a different company, richer health plan, worse EMR, is a different number. Same company, different trade. Remember the roofer's comp rate, different number again. This is why the answer to what's labor burden is always for whom, doing what, where. 3. This is the number RS means calls the bare labor cost plus burden, and it's baked into every crew rate you're about to use. Which is the perfect segue. Everybody good on the arithmetic? Look left, look right. If your neighbor's lost, help them now, because the next slide stacks people on top of this. Here's the reality the last slide ignored. Work doesn't get done by one carpenter. It gets done by crews, a foreman, some journeymen, an apprentice or two, maybe a piece of equipment, all working together at different wages. And your estimate doesn't want 5 separate rates. It wants one number per crew hour. That number is the composite crew rate, and it's just a weighted average of burden rates. Build one with me. Say our framing crew is 1 foreman at a burdened $46 an hour, 3 journeymen at our burdened $39, 1 apprentice at a burdened $26. 5 people. 1 crew hour costs 46 plus open parenthesis 3 times 39 close parenthesis plus 26 is equal to 46 plus 117 plus 26 equals $189 per crew hour. And if you want the average cost per worker hour, which is how a lot of unit prices are expressed, divide by the 5 workers. 189 over 5 equals $37.80 per labor hour. Notice 2 things about that composite. First, it's below the journeyman rate. The apprentice pulls the average down. That's not an accounting trick. That's the actual economics of crew design. Crew mix is a cost lever. A foreman-heavy crew is expensive per hour. An apprentice-rich crew is cheap per hour but, foreshadowing slide 10, may produce fewer units per hour. Cost per hour means nothing until it meets productivity. Second, change the mix. The number moves instantly. Pull the apprentice, add a journeyman, re-average. That's why we build this as a calculator and not a lookup. Mixes change job to job. Now connect this to the tool you'll live in all semester. RS means. Open any means line item and the labor price isn't a carpenter. It's a crew designation. C1, C2, and so on. Flip to the crew tables in the back, and there's the recipe. Exactly how many of which trades, at what bare and burden rates, plus the equipment that travels with the crew, rolled into a daily crew cost. When means says a crew installs so many units per day, the labor unit price is that crew's daily cost divided by that daily output. Everything we just did by hand, means has pre-packaged with national average wages. And there's the catch. National average is nobody's actual number. Means gives you city cost indexes to adjust, but a contractor bidding real work with its own payroll builds its own crew rates from its own burden worksheet. Means for structure and productivity, your numbers for rates, which is precisely the machine you're about to build. Laptops open for real this time. Setup talk, 3 minutes. Circulation, 10, 11 minutes. Debrief, 3 minutes. Keep the slide up, it carries the activity brief. All right, here's the deal. In the next 15 plus minutes you're going to build, from a blank workbook, the tool professional estimators keep within arm's reach, a crew cost calculator. And I mean build. No downloading, no copying your neighbor's file. The value is in the wiring. Here's the spec. 3 zones on one sheet. Zone 1, the burden worksheet. Column of inputs, base wage, then every burden line from slide 7. FICA percent, FUTA/SUTA percent, comp rate per $100, EMR, health dollar per month, retirement percent, PTO days, training, small tools percent. Miscellaneous formulas convert each to dollars per hour, sum to total burden, and output burden rate and burden percent. Every rate and input cell, every result a formula. If I change one input, everything downstream updates. No hard-typed answers. Zone 2, the crew builder. A table, rows for up to, say, 6 positions. Columns, position name, count, base wage, which pulls a burden rate from Zone 1's logic, and extended cost. At the bottom, total crew cost per hour and average cost per labor hour. Use our framing crew as your test data. Foreman, 3 journeymen, apprentice. Zone 3, the sanity panel. 3 checks. Burden percent should land somewhere plausible, 30s to 50s. Composite rate should sit between your lowest and highest individual rates. If it doesn't, your weights are wrong. And a cell that shows total crew cost per day at 8 hours, because that's the number you'll compare against RS means crew tables next week. Build it however you like structurally, but 3 professional habits are graded by eyeball when I walk around. Inputs separated from formulas. Shade your input cells. Labels and units on everything. A naked number is a future mistake, and no magic numbers inside formulas. 7.65% lives in a cell, not buried in an equation. 15 minutes on the clock. When your test crew reads $189 per crew hour and $37.80 per labor hour, you've matched the board and you're wired correctly. Then start stress testing. Crank the EMR to 1.4 and watch what happens. Go. Circulate. Watch for the classic errors. Burden applied to burden rate instead of base. Double dipping. Health insurance entered per month, but never divided by 173. Comp entered as $7.50 instead of 7.5%. Weighted average done as a simple average of the 3 rates. Nudge with questions, not answers. Should the apprentice count the same as 3 journeymen in your average? At 13 minutes, 2-minute warning. At 15, debrief. All right, eyes up, hands off keyboards. Show of hands. Who hit 189? Good. Who got a composite above the journeyman rate? That's the simple average trap. You average the rates instead of weighting by head count. 5 people don't vote equally when 3 of them are journeymen. Who forgot to divide the health insurance by monthly hours and got a burden rate in the hundreds. Happens every year. Units, units, units. Now the stress test. Those who cranked EMR to 1.4. What happened to the crew rate? Take answer. Right. Comp scaled up 40%. The whole crew got more expensive and nothing else changed. One safety number moved your bid. That's the lesson in one keystroke. Save this file. This calculator is not a class exercise. It's a course tool. It feeds directly into your small commercial building project, and I'll expect burden crew rates, not base wages, on every labor line you submit from here forward. You now own half the labor equation, the rate. Here's the other half, and honestly the harder half, the hours. The master equation of labor estimating. Labor cost equals quantity times labor hours per unit times burden rate. Quantity, you learned in week 1. Rate, you built 20 minutes ago. That middle term, hours per unit, is productivity, And it's where estimating stops being arithmetic and starts being judgment. Two ways to express it, flip sides of one coin. Production rate, units per time. A crew hangs 40 sheets of drywall a day. Unit rate, time per unit, 0.35 labor hours per sheet. Get comfortable flipping between them, because mean speaks daily output, and your estimate wants labor hours. The conversion is just division. Crew labor hours per day divided by units per day. Where do productivity numbers come from? Three sources, in order of trustworthiness. Your company's historical cost records, what your crews actually did on the last 5 jobs. Gold standard, guarded like trade secrets, because they are trade secrets. Published references like RS means, solid national baselines, and what we'll use in this course. But remember, they assume an average crew on an average day. And judgment, the estimator adjusting for this job's reality. Adjusting for what? Look at the factor list. Weather, productivity in a Texas August afternoon is not catalog productivity. Heat breaks are real hours. Overtime, here's the counterintuitive one. Sustained overtime reduces hourly productivity. Fatigue is cumulative, week after week of 60s, and the extra hours produce less and less while costing time and a half. Overtime is a schedule tool, not a production tool. Congestion and stacking of trades. 20 workers in a mechanical room produce less per person than 10. Repetition and the learning curve. Floor 8 of a hotel goes faster than floor 2. Production work beats one-off work. Crew experience and supervision, site logistics, ceiling heights, occupied buildings. Every one of these moves the middle term of the equation. And here's why this slide sits after the crew slide. Rate and productivity are a package deal. Remember our apprentice-heavy crew, cheaper per hour? It may also be slower per unit. The only honest comparison between two crews is cost per unit installed, dollars per hour divided by units per hour. A $189 crew that hangs 40 sheets a day beats a $160 crew that hangs 30. Run that math right now in your heads. Roughly $37.80 a sheet versus $42.70. Cheaper crew, more expensive drywall. That's the trap, and cost per unit is how you never fall in it. 2 housekeeping items that turn into disasters if you skip them, then the Hall of Shame. First, prevailing wage. The moment your project has federal money in it, and plenty of state and local work mirrors this, the Davis-Bacon Act applies. You must pay at least the government-determined prevailing wage and fringe for each trade classification in that county. Those rates come from published wage determinations that get attached to the bid documents, and they are frequently much higher than your open shop rates. The fringe component must be paid in bona fide benefits or in cash on the check. Estimating consequence. On a prevailing wage job, you rebuild your burden worksheet from the wage determination, trade by trade. Your everyday rates are irrelevant. Miss this on bid day, and you can be underwater the moment you sign. And the compliance tail, certified payroll, submitted weekly, with real penalties, including debarment, for getting it wrong. When you screen an invitation to bid, is this prevailing wage? Is a question you answer before you price a single hour. Now the Hall of Shame, the labor pricing mistakes that show up in real bid rooms every year. Count how many we've armed you against today. Estimating at base wage. The 39% hole. The original sin. One blanket burden percent across all trades. The roofer and the office engineer do not carry the same comp rate. Wrong comp class or ignored EMR. Either one silently swings the labor line by double digits. Forgetting the overtime premium, twice. Once in the rate, time and a half, and note. Burden math on OT is tricky. Some burden items apply to the premium, some are capped, and once in productivity, fatigued crews produce less. Missing PTO and the paid, but not working hours. The invisible burden. Simple averaging crew rates. Half of you just made this one 20 minutes ago. Never again. Using national average book rates unadjusted for your city, your market, your payroll. Not reading the wage determination on public work. Every one of those is a real check somebody wrote. The worksheet you built today is the vaccine for most of this list. Let's land it. 5 things leave the room with you today. 1. Wage is not cost. Burden, statutory plus voluntary, commonly adds a third to a half on top, and the fully burdened rate is the only labor rate that enters an estimate. 2. Burden is a build-up. FICA at 7.65, unemployment, comp per $100 times EMR, health, retirement, PTO, tools, every line traceable to a document. 3. Work is priced by crews. Composite rates are weighted averages, and RS means crews are exactly this machine with national average inputs. 4. Labor cost equals quantity times hours per unit times burden rate, and productivity, the middle term, is where judgment lives. Compare crews on cost per unit, never cost per hour. 5. Safety is an estimating input. The EMR proves it in arithmetic, and prevailing wage rewires everything, so check for it before you price. Walk through the assignment and next class details exactly as posted on the slide and in Canvas, deliverable, due date, submission format. Then take questions. Your calculator file comes with you to every class from here on. It's now part of your estimating toolkit alongside OSD and means, and it goes to work on the small commercial building project. Guard it, improve it, and whatever you do, never let me catch a base wage in your estimate again. Good work today. See you next class.